Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be covering unifying siloed operations with infrastructure orchestration. Specifically, we're going to be looking at Spacelift and its capabilities around these kind of use cases here. My name is Jake Johnson. I'm a solutions engineer here at Spacelift. And I've been with the company for about 2.5 years, based out of San Diego. And excited to kind of give you an example and a demo of Spacelift today. I also just want to mention we do have some other solution engineers in the chat. So as we're going through the demonstration today, we want to welcome you to ask any questions along the way. I'll have some stopping points to do some Q&A. And then if at any point you have any questions throughout, feel free to throw them in the chat and we're well equipped to help answer any of those. So with that, we'll kind of come into the subject of the call today. And that is going to be why teams are struggling, with infrastructure automation. And what we see is, or what we did is we did a survey of around 400 people or so. And this is something that we came back with is at the core of the infrastructure automation challenge is the speed versus control paradox. So how can teams move fast without sacrificing security, compliance, or stability? How are they able to, move quickly and securely there? And so what we found here is that we have these 4 different types of kind of indexes here that we can look at here. And as we see too, it's a kind of a common bell curve of where people generally fit, whether they're going to be an experimenter, an adopter, an optimizer, or a leader. What we're going to really take a look at is, how does someone get to that leader of the automation index there, the infrastructure automation. And this typically looks like something where they're going to be, deeply integrated with all of their security, compliance, and scalability controls, and really automating everything out all the way there. And so if we come over here, we can take a deeper look at, what it looks like for those leaders, what kind of, automation are they getting? What are some metrics that they see? And so for those who do master the infrastructure automation, the real benefits are they're 2 times more likely to get infrastructure deployments right on the first try. So quickly develop and quickly deploy and have it, good the first time. They're 4 times more likely to provision new resources in 4 hours or less, which allows you to really increase that velocity of infrastructure development, quicker feedback loop and everything there as well. And then they're 4 times more or 5 times more likely to deploy changes in production daily or multiple times a day even. And so we come over here to this next slide. This is how we see the leaders automate the infrastructure pipelines. And so leaders have streamlined and automated day 1 and day 2 operations. So what we're seeing is for that full automation and everything, unifying those siloed operations, 83% of the leaders are, within that full automation range, and about 56% of the overall survey that we took were in this kind of streamlined automated day 1 and day 2 operations there. And so with that, we'll actually kind of go into taking a look at how Spacelift can really help with unifying and automating all of these types of operations day 1 and day 2. And to start with that, we're going to kind of go through a high-level view of Spacelift, what Spacelift really is, how it operates, and then we'll kind of move into the actual demonstration portion of the call today. And so, Spacelift is the orchestration or the infrastructure orchestration platform here. So we deliver secure, cost-effective, and resilient infrastructure, and we do it fast. So we do that by, helping out with the provisioning. So speed infrastructure provisioning with an automated workflow. It integrates with all of your various tools. As you can see that we have direct integration with many different types of tooling down here, but really Spacelift is a very agnostic platform. So when it comes to version control systems, any type of Git-based system we can integrate with. We have, very common direct integrations with major cloud providers, but again, any type of provider can be used within something like Spacelift. When it comes to application deployment, configuration management, observability, we can also integrate with a number of those tools. And then you'll also see with the infrastructure as code, we can integrate with things from Terraform, OpenTofu, all the way to CloudFormation, Pulumi, those types of toolings there. So any type of tool stack, we can really help you, integrate and provision with those. And extending your pipelines beyond those provisionings, that's where we get into more of the config management piece with something like Ansible. or even the Kubernetes integration. Additionally, Spacelift is an API-first product, so we can also help with integrating Spacelift into the full ecosystem of things and allowing you to integrate with post-infrastructure deployment type of workflows as well. And then lastly here, but definitely importantly, is going to be the governance piece. So giving you a unified platform of where all your resources live, how do they come to be, there's feedback here. But yeah, where that governance comes in along the way. So integrating directly with security, anywhere from the initialization or the planning of those deployments to make sure you catch things before anything is going to happen there. And as we'll see later, our governance layer is really deeply integrated with Open Policy Agent Project, also known as OPA or OPA. So we'll be taking a deeper look at that as well. And now we'll kind of move into the typical Spacelift workflow. And so what we'll do is we'll start with that Terraform code in today's demo, but this can really be any of the IAC tools that we support. So any like Terraform or OpenTofu, Ansible even, it's always going to start with the code first approach there, and it's going to be very Git driven. And so Spacelift will watch for all those changes to your Git repository. Again, we can integrate with any type of Git-based system here. And Spacelift will watch all that through what we call a stack. So a stack is going to encompass that integration with the Git configuration. It's going to know the Terraform that you're using, the version, all of its configuration, and then it's going to know the cloud account that you're wanting to manage. That stack, in terms of Terraform and OpenTofu at least, will always have a state file associated with it. So you can always think of a stack as managing a specific set of resources in a specific way. These stacks can have policies integrated with them for governance and notification and routing, those types of things. Additionally, you can integrate any type of testing suite or security scans, networking scans, any type of custom workflow pieces can be integrated into those stacks. And then what we'll also take a look at is going to be spaces. And spaces is a way to really compartmentalize, where are these resources living in your Spacelift account? Who has access to view these resources or manage these resources? Are there different governance rules based off of the space that it's in? Maybe it's like a dev or staging or production. And so there's a really easy way to kind of compartmentalize, group things up, and then give you that very streamlined, automated way of doing things there. And so that stack there will give you the full life cycle, the init, plan, and apply of the infrastructure is where that CI/CD comes in. And so next we can look at the orchestration architecture. So this is really how Spacelift works on the backend side. And as you see, we sit on top of all infrastructure as code tools down here. And there's even different flavors of the IAC tools that were not necessarily listed here. And again, that will feed into that version control system. So any type of Git event, whether it be like a merge, a pull request, a direct commit, releasing a module release, something along those lines, Spacelift will watch for those changes in the version control system. Additionally, we are an API first product as well. So you can always interact with Spacelift in a truly API driven way. We also have spacectl, which is our command line tool that allows you to do a lot of local operations, from your terminal, or integrate Spacelift into things like a Jenkins or GitHub Actions pipeline. If something needs to happen after the code change, but before you want to really kick off the full deployment cycle. And then, so the Spacelift platform here is what's watching for all of those various API calls and Git events there. And that platform can be, cloud hosted by us, or it can be hosted on your end. And then all of the actual jobs are going to be carried out on what we call workers. These workers are just going to be Docker containers that can live anywhere that you need them to. And again, we have a cloud piece where you can have public workers that we host and manage, or you can have private workers for if you want a little bit more granularity around how these workers are configured or where these workers live for security reasons. You have the option of self-installing these workers as well. And again, we can integrate with any of the cloud providers you see over here, as well as things like OCI or anything with really a provider to it. So with that, what we'll do is we'll go over what we're going to cover in the workshop today. One thing I forgot to list here is we'll go over some of the code that we'll be looking at. It's going to be very simple Terraform code. and then also, a deeper look into some of the policies. But after we kind of get our bearings there, we're going to go into our Spacelift account. We're going to create a Spacelift stack. We're going to walk through the configurations of what that looks like. We will then configure our integration to deploy to AWS. We'll then configure our plan policy, and I'll go over the various policy types to implement some governance to check on things. And then we will actually trigger a full run, see some real-time feedback, see a failure due to governance rules, and then go through how do we actually adjust for that? How do we take that information and then fix it and then deploy compliant cloud resources there? And I will leave this up for a second, just in case you want to scan that QR code or go to a free trial piece. But there was a read ahead out, I believe. So for some people, if you are following along today and wanting to actually go through creating the stack and creating these resources, I'll have little pivot points to make sure that that everything's going okay there. But to start, we'll actually go through the repository that we'll be looking at today. So let me come out of there. We will go to this demo here. All right, so before we actually jump into the Spacelift platform, we'll take a look at the repository and the resources we'll be using today. Really, we're just concerned with this AWS S3 folder here. And what we'll see is it's a very simple Terraform setup. So we have our variables defined in one file, we have our provider set up in another. And then if we look at the main TF, we're seeing that we're simply creating an S3 bucket, and we're just kind of randomly generating the name here with 2 random string and random integer. And so very simple Terraform code just to deploy a simple S3 bucket. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through and try to deploy this bucket, but we're going to set up some guardrails around enforcing tagging, which are very common use cases for what we see these plan policies being used. So now we can actually jump into the actual Spacelift account. And before we move here, get a sip of water really quick, look at the chat. Perfect. See, Gareth is linking some stuff there. All right. So the first thing that we will do is we'll actually go over to our spaces here, and we'll talk to spaces. I'll explain a little bit more in detail. We'll show some examples around this, and then we'll start actually creating a space and then using that for the demo today. So if we come over to spaces, we can see we have quite a bit going on here. But just to quickly explain spaces and see what they can do, I'll start with this example one over here. And what we'll see is that we have a structure of maybe a cloud team, and then that cloud team has a respective dev, staging, and production accounts tied to it. And so as we'll see later within this demo is there's a lot of various resources that we can create in Spacelift. So one of those will be a stack, which is going to represent that CI/CD kind of state change portion there. We'll also create a policy. That policy we will see is going to be that governance piece enforcing tags on certain resources or something along those lines. And there's a lot of various kind of guardrails and configurations and testing that we can implement. And one way that Spacelift really makes this, an agnostic approach is through spaces. And so as we'll see, each component in Spacelift has to live and be assigned to a specific space. And so what that allows for is if we click into one of these here, we can see inheritance can be enabled, meaning if I set some guardrails and some controls and certain information that lives in this cloud team space here, and I want it to be accessible down to the development space, I can set that here. And so that way I can share common resources that maybe cloud team has, like maybe there's a common guardrail that says cloud team has to tag all of the resources with a cloud team tag. You could have a policy check for that here, and you could have it be shared and applied to everything that is concerned the cloud team there. This is also where a lot of role-based access control comes in. So any OIDC or SAML provider we can integrate with, things like Okta, OneLogin, Azure AD, AWS SSO, anything along those lines. And so what you can do is you can say if they're part of the cloud team admin team, give them admin rights to everything here. If they're more so just cloud team infrastructure engineers, maybe you want to give them admin to dev, staging, and prod, but then leave this space just to read for them. So there's a lot of granularity you can get within these spaces here. And so to kind of help build on that, what we can do is I've already created one, but we can go through and create another one, is we can have a PlatformCon space. So for those following along, you most likely just have a root space here. What we can do is we can come over and hover over root. You can hit this little create space button, or you can come up here, hit create space. And what you can do is type in anything you would like. We can name this one PlatformCon. Additionally, you can enter in a description if needed, any labels you want. And then for parent space, we want to make sure that we have root selected here. This will most likely default if you don't have any other spaces, but just to be clear, you'll want to name it PlatformCon or something similar, then have parent space as root. And we will want to do inheritance enabled here. So I'll leave this for a moment. All right, so now that we have our space created here, you should see something like root and then carry down to PlatformCon. What we can do now is we can actually go in and create a stack here. And what we're going to do is we will come up to the stack screen on the left and move to the create stack button. And then what we can do is we can also name this one PlatformCon. Let's see, we'll do, we're going to type. There we go. We'll name this PlatformCon. And I'm even going to do a -S3 just to kind of make it a little bit more specific here. And so in terms of keeping everything relevant into its kind of contextual space, we'll want to put this stack into our PlatformCon space here just to kind of keep everything, together where it makes sense. And then so this screen can just simply be the name and then the appropriate space. And this is the point I was trying to make earlier too, is like we can see here that everything has to live within a respective space. So this will always be a requirement when adding these types of things. So we're going to continue from there. This is where you can set up any of your code bases here. And today we're going to be looking at, GitHub, and then we'll also be looking at the Spacelift S3 demo repo, the one that we just took a look at in the very beginning. Gareth has also, I think, set it up in the chat there. So if you wanted to fork that, or if you just forked that, you should see that popping up within here. And then we'll want to select the main branch in this case. I'll kind of talk through the different ways of like why you might want to do different branches here, but we should see a main and a dev branch. And this should be good to go. The project root here should be AWS S3. So this project root is a way to scope the stack down to say, hey, I want to track this repository, I want to track this specific branch, and then I have a specific directory that I want to look at. This is really useful for things like project roots, or rather, mono repos, and large Terraform repos where you really want to scope things down to various types of things. And then we'll continue from there. Today we're going to be looking at, we'll just be running it in Terraform FOSS. We'll be just running it in 1.5.7. We can leave everything toggled as is here. So we can do smart sanitization, and then we can also do manage state. So Spacelift can manage the state for you. And what that looks like is we would manage it in an S3 bucket on our end. It'd be encrypted at rest and in transit. We also take the zero trust approach with that. However, you can also manage state fully on your own backend if you had, security needs or any other preferences of managing that state. There's really no loss of features or functionality. It's more of a convenience feature with Spacelift. But once we have our vendor screen set up like this, we can hit create and continue. What we can do next is we can kind of run through the various stack options that we can do here and see exactly how we can configure these. And so we'll look at the define stack behavior. This is where we could see the, if we had private workers set up, we would be able to configure those here. If we wanted to specify a specific runner image, if we are using the public workers or even the private workers and we want to manage it this way, you can add a specific runner image here that has additional tooling for your runs, anything that you need there. And then really all that we want to do here is we just want to leave it as is. Administrative allows Spacelift to manage other stacks. I should have mentioned in the beginning, we have a Terraform provider. So Spacelift can manage itself using our Terraform code or our Terraform provider there. And this would enable that stack to be able to manage all of that. Run promotion, it would be for some things if you wanted to do the Atlanta style workflow or have the apply before merge type of workflows. You can have run promotion enabled for that to give you that. Auto deploy is once you feel very secure about your governance layers in your stacks, you can have space. Let's say if every check is successful, go on to the apply phase, let it fully deploy here. For today's demo, we'll leave auto deploy off just to kind of get to some of the confirm steps and be able to review things a little bit easier. Local preview will enable more of local planning and things like that through our command line tool, giving you that kind of local Terraform plan feel. Secret masking is always recommended just to automatically redact secrets out of the logs. And then if we wanted to protect from deletion, give it a little extra layer of making sure this can't be randomly deleted, we can always set that around there too. So with this, we can come over to continue. This is where we can set up any hooks. And so I'll kind of talk a little bit more in detail to this later. But what we can see here is we'll have access to various phases of the run. So a stack typically goes through an initialization, planning, and applying phase, among a few other more one-off phases. And if we wanted to run custom commands before and after the initialization or the planning or the applying, these hooks are ways that we could do that. We could implement things like linters or retrievals of secrets from a secrets manager. Or planning, we typically will see like after the plan running tfsec or trivy or checkoff, maybe a custom network scan, or if you have like a script that you wanted to run, all of that can be set up within these hooks here. So we have nothing to add today though, so we'll hit continue. And here is where we would set up our cloud integration. I've already created one, but I'll go back and kind of show how that's configured before I attach it here. So no worries about attaching anything at the moment here. Let's see if I go to continue. What we can see here is going to be policies. We'll go in a moment and also create a policy to check for some of the how our S3 is getting created. So again, no worries here for creating the policy. And context would be like variables or things like that. So if we had any environment variables that we wanted to add, we could do that here now, or we can also set that up at a later time. So here's where we can see the summary of our stack. We can see, exactly how we're trying to create it. What is our source code here? We can go back and edit things if something isn't looking right. But everything's looking good from here. So I'll leave it here for a second just to see if anybody has questions or if they want to kind of refer to this if they're following along at all. It looks like there's some, but yeah, each round's got those. All right, so what we'll do is we'll confirm this, and we will then see a stack created here. And so now the stack is created, we can see that we have various options here. We'll always see if state is managed by Spacelift here. And once we have some actual resources deployed, we can see everything that is managed by this specific stack. We can come into the track runs to see all of the apply runs happen, PRs for any type of pull request workflows, any open pull requests. So there's a lot that we can do within these stacks and a lot of configuration and visibility we get with these. But one of the main things we're going to look at next is going to be setting up how does Spacelift know where to deploy to, and then additionally, how can we verify and make sure that our resources are going to be compliant, and how can we check for that in the first place. And so what we'll do is we will go over to our cloud integration screen on this left nav bar here. And I'll already have one set up, but we can click into one of these here and kind of get an idea. Or what we'll do is we'll hit set up integration. Today we're using AWS, but you can see we have direct with Azure and GCP here. So if we come over here, you could name this PlatformCon if you wanted to, like PlatformCon-AWS. Again, we want to keep things relevant to where we're using everything. So in our space, we will select the PlatformCon space here. And so the way that this integration works is you would configure an IAM role, and you can scope that to any specific permissions that you need. In today's demo, if you've already created it through the read ahead, you can have it just be allowed to create S3 buckets, or you can kind of give it that more administrative role if you wanted to. And then the main thing is you want to configure the trust policy on that role. And it will give it to you here as well. So you can always come over here and copy this and then add this trust policy to your role. And essentially what this is saying is Spacelift will be allowed to assume this role to go in and actually manage the infrastructure through what you've set here. So you can see here the external ID is saying, my Spacelift account name, which is Jake SL Test. And then I have @, meaning any stack within this account can be used by this IAM role. And you would just simply have your ARN here. And then you can leave the duration to an hour. That can be anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. And then optionally, you can set some default region. But I'll leave this here for a moment. I think most of y'all that are following along probably set this up previously. So we'll leave that here. And now that our integration has been created, we can go back to our stack here. Oops, sorry, I have a filter on. Let me type in PlatformCon. I'm going to update this for now because we'll be coming back. And we can come over here. We can go up to our stack settings here, or our stack actions, and go to settings here. And then we will see an integrations tab over here. And this is where we can go in and attach that newly created AWS integration. And so what we'll do is for now, we'll just hit general, or in your case, it would show as PlatformCon or whatever you just named it. And we'll want to give it read, and we'll want to give it write here. And so once your screen looks like this, you have the appropriate integration set. We can do read and write, and then hit attach. Let's see, I'll leave this here, and I'll kind of see if there's any questions around specifically stacks or some of the steps that we've gone through today to make sure if anybody got lost that was following along, we give them a moment to catch up. And I see, Rami, you have, can an integration be set up with on-premise resources? So depending on the provider and what you're wanting to use, we can definitely support certain cloud providers that are like that. For more on-prem, we sometimes see Ansible be used for that. Essentially, if you have the worker configured with the appropriate networking rules and networking configuration, Spacelift can freely deploy to whatever you configure it to. But I'm not sure if Jabran or Joey have additional resources, or Cal within there as well. Awesome. Okay. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. So we can go in, we can attach this integration. And now our stack will have a designated role or account to deploy to. So now Spacelift could actually go through and deploy this S3 here. It would know exactly where to go and push that. But before we do that, we want to look at setting up a policy, and we want to apply governance out the gate for this. I'm getting some feedback there. And so what we'll do is we'll come over to our policy section, and we'll kind of first talk through some of the different types of policies. We'll go through and create this policy together here in a moment, but I want to just quickly show the various types that we can create. And so the first one that we can really look at will be this git push. So what we see a lot of the times is people will want to kind of change the default behavior of how Spacelift operates. Maybe you have a tag-driven workflow where you want to say only git commits with a deploy tag or a dev tag can trigger the dev workflow or deploy it all. Or maybe you want to have a no-op tag to say this shouldn't do anything. We just want to update some code and prevent it from triggering anything at all. Or if you really want to scope down and automate a lot of that out and say only trigger in certain situations, or maybe don't trigger anything that's not a Terraform file, or maybe look at another piece here, the push policy can really help, granularly define how Spacelift will treat a GET call and an API call there. So any type of guardrail around how something gets kicked off can be set up with a push policy there. The next one we'll see, and what we'll actually implement today, is going to be a plan policy. And the plan policy, as we'll see, is able to, trigger an approval workflow or completely deny runs during the planning phase based off what it's seeing. So common examples of this are going to be enforcing tags on resources, which is what we'll implement today. Or maybe you want to, limit the size of an EC2 instance or a VM on dev environments to reduce costs. You can have it say, don't let anything larger than a T3 micro deploy. given that's going to incur too much cost there. You can also have plan policies evaluate the provider configuration, the module sources that you're using, the AI models that are being leveraged. You can have it, also look at the scans that you're running. So if you're running something like TFSec or Trivi checkoff and it reports back with a certain output, you can have a plan policy evaluate how did TFSec, what did it find? Did it find one security issue? Was it a major? Was it a minor? And then you can have appropriate approval workflows or denials kick off automatically, dependent on what's coming from those various toolings. So the plan policy is very powerful when it comes to really enforcing those types of governance and security controls. And then the last one I'll really talk about here is going to be, or actually before the last one, I'll talk about the approval. The approval policy allows you to set granular controls around those various types of workflows. So you can say, if it's in a warrant state, like a plan policy found something, maybe you need to require security approval, or maybe it requires the team lead of whoever owns that stack. And then independently, you can control the rejection rules, where maybe it always takes 2 rejections of any type of member, any type of team, or it has to be more specific than that. But then the approval side of it, you can also say it's going to require 1 of each team, multiple people, those types of things. And then lastly, here we have the notification policy, where the notification policy can send to any HTTP endpoint. It can be used for sending a lot of metrics out to things like Datadog, Splunk, Dynatrace, any of those kind of metrics platform. Or you can also send it off to any type of messaging platform like Slack, Discord, and Teams, which we have direct integration with. However, we have people that integrate with things like Mattermost or other messaging platforms. And that can say, maybe security's approval is required for a run to complete. You could go and ping the security team or channel, the individuals. You can set up that alerting immediately to make sure people are aware. You can send them a link to the run with a quick synopsis of why is their attention requested in the first place. So all of these policies are really powerful for making sure people are included immediately. It's also verifying and checking things without any necessary human review, but it will also require human approval and review when necessary. And so one thing I want to look at here is now creating the PlatformCon policy. We'll come in and take a look at what this one is doing here and kind of look through it. For reference, this is Rego. So this is OPA's language here. And I'll kind of go into a way that we can help support really learning Rego and kind of in that path if you're not used to it. We have a templates feature that we'll take a look at here in a moment of really, how can you streamline and kind of ramp up on these policies. But what we'll see here is that this plan policy will have a deny rule. And what we're saying is we want to have a message here that's saying, hey, this resource does not have the tags. And then we want to, pass in to that custom message what that resource is. And here we can see what this is actually checking for. When is this going to deny? And so what we're saying is we want to define a variable that's going to say, hey, just grab the Terraform resources being proposed here in this planning phase. And then we're going to grab the tags of that resource. So we want to see, all right, what are the resource tags here? And if the tags are null, meaning there's no tag present on this S3 bucket, we would want to deny the run. This is more of a general policy saying this is just enforcing tags on all resources, but you could scope this down specifically to S3 buckets or EC2s, any type of resource. You can really scope these down to be as granular as you'd like, or you can have them be a little bit more broad like the one we see here today. And then with the sampling true on, this will capture all the data that's evaluated whenever this policy is running. And so if we come over to this right-hand side, you can see a simulation panel, and we'll take a look at this after the run. But what we'll see is that when this policy gets evaluated, we'll see all of the inputs and all of the data that comes in here. And then we can simulate based off of changing that input data. We could change the policy around and then simulate what would happen if our resource had, this kind of piece, or what if we were checking for a different type of attribute? And then you can come in and simulate and make sure you're going to get the expected results. And then you can always update or apply that policy there. And so quickly, just to run through in case people are following along, we'll hit this create policy up here. And here we can, again, name it PlatformCon if we would like. You can name this, PlatformCon S3 check or S3 tag. Anything along those lines would be definitely appropriate. And what we'd want to do is make sure that the type is set as plan policy. This will dictate that it's going to run in the planning phase and it's going to evaluate specific data. And then again, we'll want to make sure this is living in our appropriate space of PlatformCon. So we want to, again, keep things packaged up into its relevant space, making sure that it's not being shared outside other teams that maybe don't need it, keeping it all there. And so I'll leave this here. Yeah, and I think, Nick, you have a question. Is there a doc with the policy for us to copy from? I'll go over the templates thing. Thanks to Ron for answering that. But I can definitely go in and show the templates piece here in a moment. All right, so with this, you can hit continue, and then you should see your PlatformCon policy be populated here. But to go into the question that Nick has, and something that we definitely love to show in terms of whenever we're talking about policies, is the template screen here. So on this policies sidebar, you'll see a template piece up here, and you'll see we're showing 50 of 59. So this is a list of pre-existing policies that are coming from a public GitHub repo. That repo is something that we manage, but we have policies in there that are from existing customers, they're from current prospects, they're from our own internal use cases, and they're meant to really cover a wide range of use cases and workflows. You can see here that we have quite a few labels attached to them, all these gray boxes, and we can filter down by various labels to keyword search. We also can filter down by various types. So like, okay, I want to implement a plan policy. You could select that, and then this will filter down just to the types of plan. Excuse me. And then this is where we can really start to see what is out there in terms of plan policies. And we can see here that we have 27 of those 59 are actually set to be these. And say we wanted to instead do an approval policy. Like we're like, okay, we want to have security approval or maybe some team based approval. We want to get an idea of that. We could filter by approval, or even without that, we could type in like security or something like that. And this will give us a list of these. And then we can go through, do approval. And now we can see that we have some policies that exist for requiring approval from security team, or even role-based approval that's a little bit more generic there. And so what we can do is if this require approval from security team, maybe that's the one we're looking for. We can come over here, read this description, and see that it's going to approve any run when someone from the security team approves the changes for specified resources. Reject the run when someone from other teams tries to approve the changes. So that way we can make sure changes to critical resources are reviewed and approved by security team. All right, maybe that's what it sounds like. That's what we want. We can also come over here, see exactly how this policy is created. We could read through and say, okay, the run state has to be unconfirmed, meaning it's in a, right before the deploy state. We can see that these are going to be the approval list for what resources are allowed. And, if anything in this, anything that requires approval is essentially going to be these policies or these resources. So we can come through here, we can see the policy code, we can read the description. If it's something that we want to implement into our own account, we can come over here to this import. We can then change the name if we wanted to. We can then select the space that we want, and then make sure it's going to be pushed into the right space, edit the description, add in the additional labels, and then we could hit continue. This would now import directly into our account, and we could save it that way. The other way to do that is you can always come over here and copy this Rego code. You can manage all of the policies as Terraform code as well. So you can always keep like a policies folder in your repository. And then when you use our Terraform provider, you can define a policy and you can say the policy is going to get its policy body from this other directory or this other folder here. So you can always manage everything programmatically that way as well. But yeah, this is very powerful, really helpful for getting streamlined and started with these policies. Additionally, we're always happy to help you build these policies and make sure they're going to behave how you want them to. But cool. I don't see any other questions, so I think we are good to kind of move on and actually apply this policy and then trigger our stack and see if we can deploy some code. So if we come back to our stack screen, we'll go to the PlatformCon S3. And we can now go to our policy section here. And what we'll want to do is we'll hit attach policy on this top right. And we want to do a plan policy. And you will now see the PlatformCon show up here. And we're going to want to have it set up just like this. So on this attached policy screen, you should have plan and PlatformCon, or whatever you name the policy, I guess. And then we can hit attach here. And so now we can see that our policy is attached. We can go back to our stack actions up here, go to settings, and we can verify we have our AWS integration attached as well. So as of now, our plan policy is attached, our cloud integration is attached, so we should be good to trigger this run and try and deploy this S3 bucket here. And so with that, we'll hit this trigger button. Typically, you would, do a git change or git commit of some kind to kick this off. But for today, we can just hit trigger, and now we can see it actually run through. So we'll see it go through a preparing stage here just to kind of get all the worker side of things set up. Now we're going to hit the initialization. This will be a Terraform init in this stack. Given that we're using a Terraform stack here, we can see that it's running through getting the AWS provider initialized and everything there. Fairly typical of what you'd see on like a local Terraform init. And now we can move to the planning phase where we can see it's proposing what we should create. We can see our S3 bucket. We can see the random string and the random integer that we saw in that file earlier. And so now it's running that Terraform plan. Additionally, we can always expand this out and see a full picture. But now we can see here that we got denied by that policy. So if we hit the close here, we'll now have a clear picture of like, okay, our run failed. Looks like everything was good. Like there wasn't any reason the Terraform code itself caused the failure, but more so we get this direct message saying, hey, your S3 bucket doesn't have the tags. It's missing the tags there. And so this is a good way to see immediately like, okay, we're not compliant. We know that we have to have tags on this S3 bucket. So now what we want to do is actually implement a change to fix that. And so what we'll do now is we'll go over to our GitHub repository that we're using today. And what we'll see is we have a dev branch here. So if you fork this over, hopefully you saw the checkbox or in the instructions not to only fork over the main. If not, no big deal. But we can see here again that in our main branch, we have our main TF and it's just defining the S3 bucket like so. If we come over to the dev branch, we can see that we've already implemented a change that will implement a tag to this, and it's going to have the value of our name. And so this change, we think, should hopefully get us past that policy check and make this S3 bucket compliant. So what we can do is we can come over and then actually create a pull request for this. So we'll hit new pull request. We will say we want to do, I want to make sure I get the right one here. Let's see, prepare main, we want to do dev. And we can see here that we're going to want to do our dev to main, and we can see that it's going to be implementing that change again. So we'll hit create pull request. We won't worry about adding anything too much here. We'll say we'll say add tag to S3, and we'll hit create pull request. And so what we'll see from here now is Spacelift is going to go through, and then it's going to run through this merge, we should see the check, which we do now. So now we can see that a proposed run has kicked off in Spacelift. So we can navigate to that from here, and we'll click into this here, go over to view more details on Spacelift. And what we'll see is that we have a proposed run going. And these proposed runs essentially operate the exact same as tracked runs, but they will stop after the planning phase. They never move to an apply phase by default. If you wanted to have that run promotion enabled, you would have a chance to promote these proposed runs to a full track run, but proposed runs will always hit just the planning phase, never move past. And if we actually come back out, we'll hit the stacks button out here and we'll go to our main view. We can click in. We can see our failed track run earlier, but if we wanted to see a history of things, we can also go to this PRs tab here, and we can see our list of pull requests that are open currently. And so we hit add tag to S3. We can see that this is what just ran. And we can see here it ran through the initialization phase, and then it hit that planning phase. We can expand this out again. And we can see that we're creating that S3 bucket, that random integer and random string. But now this time we can see in the Terraform plan, that tag is being picked up from that pull request. Oh, I'm going to log back in. Don't know what happened there. Okay, we'll go back to our PRs tab. Sorry about that. And now we can see that tag's there. We can also see that that plan policy got evaluated. So we can see that the plan policy said, yep, we see the tag now. Everything's good to go. This is compliant, with everything we set there. And so from here, you can see this run promotion. If we allowed for it, you could promote it there. We can also see a couple notification policies that I had pre-configured to notify Slack upon successful runs and things like that. So you can see the policies really start to implement in here. But in the case that things get too noisy, you can always simplify the view like so, just to kind of get the run logs if you're just kind of quickly going through and want to let more of the policy checks run in the background. And here we can just see it ran through the init and plan. So since we know this looks good, we know this has checked our plan policy, we can actually go in and try to actually merge this in. So if we come back out, I just want to quickly show too, we can comment in various comments into the PRs as well. But since we know this is good, we'll want to merge this pull request in. So we'll do that, confirm the merge. And now we will see that that is gone in and it is merged. So what we can do from here is we can jump back into our Spacelift account. And we can go over to our stacks again, and we'll see that this is already kicked off. So it saw that we merged that in, and it's on that merge by default. Spacelift will kick off a track run to say, okay, there's like a new merge, there's new code, we should go in and try to apply these. And what we'll see is if we come back out to the full plan, we can see our tags are present now. So presumably this should deploy now, but we'll see that with the policy check. And now we can see that our plan policy has evaluated it. It says it's okay, it's compliant, that tag is present. And then we have an auto deploy is off. So we will always hit this confirm step. If we felt good enough, this is all the security and compliance we wanted, we could turn auto deploy off in the settings, or auto deploy on rather. But we can review the plan. We can see our tags there. Our policy says it's good. So to me, it looks good. Click confirm. And now this will move up to the apply phase. And now we can see it's preparing again. It's going to go through that apply. We'll be able to see the expanded logs here as well. You can see creating the S3 bucket. Hope it doesn't take too long. Usually it doesn't take this long. There we go. And now we even had an output of a dev, but we can see the full apply happen. We have our successful notification policy that I configured separately. And now we can see that. So we can also come to this changes tab, and now we can see, exactly what got created for that specific run that we just saw. Here we can see we have our S3 bucket. So we can see the configuration of that S3. We can see our output that we produced. We can also see, the random string and integer resource and its configuration as well. So this is a really good way to see a clear picture of what just happened, what just changed there. And so now what that means too, is since there was a successful state change, we can actually come over to this resources tab. And now we have a clear picture of, what resources are managed by the stack. And also, what is known to the state here. We can also click into here and then come in and see all the configuration of these different resources, come through and see the vendor specific data, all of those side of things. Excuse me. So one thing I want to look at now is going to be that plan policy, just to kind of show some of that. But I'll wait for a second, see if there's any questions in the chat. See if anything comes up there. All right. So What we could do now is just to kind of show that policy and how we could iterate over these, get more information about them. We can come over to the policies. We'll go to that PlatformCon that we created, and we can come over to the simulation panel. Now that this policy is actually evaluated a certain run, we can see all the information that's accessible to that. And we can also hit this button up here to expand it. And we can see here, it's checking to see what is the IEC being used, what's the Spacelift information. And so here we can scroll down. I'll just scroll down quickly. You can see all the information that's accessible to us. I also want to point out this third-party metadata one at the very bottom. This is where if you had something like TF-Stack or any type of, third-party integration running in that planning phase, you would see all the information and the outputs of those toolings here. But this is where you can see, all the various types of resources being created or managed within here. There's even Spacelift specific information. You can expand out of here. You can see the run, what get commit it's looking at, all of these types of information. Here we can see that random string. We can see the random integer. Here we can see the S3 bucket. We can see the action of it too. So if it was going to be changed or deleted, something along those lines, you'd see that action. You'd see the entity. You could see the configuration of that S3 bucket or whatever resource it might be. Get information. So we can see the commit author. We'd even be able to see, it's a merge request or a merge from a pull request. All of this information is accessible over here to make sure that you're checking for the right things. You can successfully iterate over these policies and verify that they are going to work as intended there. Cool. No more questions there. So, okay, what I'll do from here is I'll kind of talk to some of the overall kind of observability pieces. So now that we have certain resources defined in Spacelift, we've gone through this track run here. We can go through and say, in the large scale of things, how can we get an overall kind of view? And if we come to this resources tab, we can see all resources that are under Spacelift management. So now we've been very focused at that stack level, looking at, just in today's demo, the S3 bucket. But if you have a more real life example, you'll see various types of resources. And you can group this by, various groupings. We can have parent, provider, stack, and type. So if we go to provider, we can see here that I have some Spacelift resources. I have AWS resources. If you had any, if you're multi-cloud and have GCP and Azure, you would see those providers show here as well. And then again, you can always click into these, different pieces to see exactly what that resource's configuration is, what stack it belongs to. That way you can always know, okay, this is a resource I need to go find and manage and do something with. You could go to that stack, find all of its history here. And additionally, you can filter by various filters here. You can come in, make sure if you have certain labels, or if you want to filter by just, GCP or something like that, or AWS, you can come through here and make sure you're filtering appropriately. And then in terms of Ansible, we talked a little bit about configuration management. When it comes to less so the cloud resource specific and more so that Ansible kind of config management piece, you can also show all hosts that are managed by Spacelift here. We can see the playbook running for them, all the various tasks that were run and their states. Additionally, instead of looking at the resource configuration, we can come in here and see the logs and everything for these various tasks here. So we come into here, we can see more. We can see if it was skipped, what was happening there. And then lastly here, I'll show this dashboarding screen. This is a really good way to get an overall health view of your Spacelift account in terms of this overview space. So here we can see, are there any runs that require our attention? Is there something unconfirmed like we saw earlier? Maybe a plan policy kicked it off, and we need to see if it's confirmed and needs our attention. We can see what's our failed stack, how many finished do we have? Again, what's unconfirmed that needs our attention. When we're the most recent approval policy evaluation, so what's been approved recently, and then even various stack metrics, things like that. And then if we come to metrics, this is going to be more cloud resource specific. So this is where we can see what exactly is being managed in our account. So we can see that we have some Terraform, we have some Kubernetes, we have some Ansible. If we had some failure rates here, we would be able to see that. If we had an initiative to cover all of our infrastructure with drift detection, to start checking for that. we'd have a very clear picture of how far are we from achieving that type of maybe compliance goal or something. Various run metrics too, number of deployments, your average run duration, and then overall drifted resources too. So we can see that in this account, we have 121 resources, only or 100% are completely healthy. But if they were drifted, we would see that number here. We could also click this. It would take us into a drifted true filter of that resources tab. So we'd have a very clear picture of what resources are drifted. Does anything require our attention there? But yeah, so we're at the hour. So I think I was expecting a little more questions. So I can 100% leave the last 30 minutes for any type of Q&A or any type of deeper dive on certain pieces. But hopefully this is helpful for those that follow along. Hopefully you're able to see the policy check and see everything kind of go through there. But happy to answer any questions. I can watch the chat and kind of go through more live answers. So I appreciate it, everybody. And I'll wait for any additional questions. Nick, sure.
Hey, so thank you very much for this presentation here.
Hmm.
Just a question for you here. So this is PlatformCon. So most of us are coming at this from a, platform engineering perspective. I'm on a cloud platform team in my organization. Talk to me about what kind of visibility and controls you have as you go up a higher level here, and you say, okay, so where we want to be able to have visibility as to, all the things in our organization that different teams have implemented, we want to be able to apply policies that cross-cut across them here. What talk to
Hmm.
me about what we can do there.
Yeah, sure. So what I'll do is I'll kind of start that answer with something in terms of context and policies. So we looked at policies. I'll talk to context a little bit here, and I'll kind of talk about the auto attachment and how you can, compartmentalize out the various teams. So I have an example context created here. And just for reference, these contexts, they're ways to store specific variables. These can be plain or secret environment variables, mounted files if it's like a TF bars or some type of public key, script file, any type of file that you need. And again, these can be plain or secret. And then hooks, again, are going to be those ways to implement security controls, custom scripting if you mounted one, all those kind of things you can say in the planning phase, I want to run TFSec or something. And then you have full visibility of where this is used. So one thing I want to point out is if we come to the details of the context, you can do auto attachment in terms of labels. And so you can say auto attach to something with an Ansible label. So any stack in this case with an Ansible label will automatically have this context attached to it. The same can be done with the policies. So that gives you a way to, if you're tagging things appropriately and they're able to be seen by the space that they're in, you can have things automatically attached from the get-go. And then in terms of viewing that and kind of seeing where teams are, who has access to certain spaces, where things are shared, that's where spaces really does come into play. And I'll switch to a different screen here in a second to kind of show how that really looks. So I'm the root admin of this account, so I can see everything. You can see I have quite a few spaces in here. And again, this is going to be where you configure, maybe some type of team here. So we can see this typically like this cloud team space can also be like a service space or maybe a customer space if you're, managing various customers, things like that. So this is more so a business unit kind of parent space. And then there's going to be that dev staging production. But what you can do in terms of the role-based access control side of this is you can let people freely self-manage their own space structures and how they're going to manage their infrastructure in general. And so what we can see is we have this cloud team space, we have dev staging production, and we want to say if they're part of the cloud team, we want to make sure that they can do whatever they need to do. Maybe they can do something like my coworker EJ, where they want to separate it out a little bit more with like a QA space, or they want to manage their spaces completely differently, like something you see over here. And so if I come over to this screen here, this is going to be the same account. I'm just logging in as a less privileged user. And if I come over to spaces here, we can see that they are only allowed to see these spaces over here. So we jump back over here. We can see, there's dozens of spaces within this account that are fully managed by the Spacelift account. But this person is just a cloud team, maybe infrastructure engineer. They just need administrative rights to manage what they're doing in terms of workflows. But then you could have people like team leads and security engineers have admin to the cloud team space. They'd be able to apply those security controls. They would know exactly where those security controls and governance rules are being applied. And then the infrastructure engineers just want to worry about creating stacks, managing the infrastructure, making sure everything's there, but they don't have to worry about attaching security and all the governance rules that can be delegated by whoever owns the space above. And so that's really whenever we see it kind of giving people the scope down, appropriate controls they need, but also lifting guardrails where necessary. Spaces is typically where we see that kind of being, portioned out there. Hopefully that was helpful. Somewhat of a long-winded answer, but you can let me know if I missed the mark or that answered your question there.
Yeah, that was very helpful, Jake. Thank you. I'm just assuming that the hierarchy can go, deeper than this if your org structure requires it.
Exactly. Yeah, you can create an infinite number of spaces. We never worry about how many you create there. So, and this is where we see this is a very common setup too, where we see some type of business unit and then a dev staging production, or in some cases you see even something like this, or like a UAT space thrown in there. Additionally, we see these being used in this manner too, where you see this inverse space. You can think of this more of like the root space, and then we see people think more in terms of dev, and then they'll have like a service A, service B, and then they'll kind of replicate that out. And then additionally, we also see on this far right over here a similar structure like this, where we'll see like someone has root, and they really separate out prod to non-prod, and then non-prod can contain dev staging. Maybe you have QA or UAT over here in prod. So these spaces are generally the three ways that we see it being done, and generally what we recommend as best practice. But there are some people that will completely make this in, like way different ways, and they'll have very, crazy structures for their spaces, but it works for them. And the thing to keep in mind here too is whenever you're creating these spaces, you want to think of role-based access control, like who should have permissions where, and then additionally, where should, to make things more shareable and more dry, where should certain policies, where should certain context and things like that be attached. So for instance, if we come over to the cloud team space again, what we could do here is say there's a cloud integration that allows Spacelift to manage the dev AWS account. You could have that cloud integration, as we saw earlier, you have to scope it specifically to a space. So if we wanted to create a cloud integration that says Spacelift can manage this dev AWS account, we can set just that cloud integration here, create the stacks that manage that dev AWS account here. That way your blast radius is limited. If someone has access to the space and they're working within this space, they can only affect that dev environment. And then for something like staging and production, you can attack on approval policies. Say production always requires an approval, even if everything has checked off, all of the policy checks and scans. But dev, we want to lift guardrails, let there be a quick, feedback loop, all those kind of things there. So these spaces can be set up to match exactly where you want to share those permissions and share those configurations. Well, all right. I think that's all the questions there are. Well, again, I appreciate everybody joining and following along. I appreciate the questions throughout. Hopefully you'll find this helpful. Thanks, John, Joey, Cal, for helping out in the chat as well. But feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I'll throw my email into the Zoom chat, jacobj@spacelift.com, in case you get a recording of this. But let us know. Always happy to help answer any questions.